Oh my goodness. I can't believe it. We're doing an afternoon show again for the first time in the Lord knows how long. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to your usual regularly scheduled programming time. Well, we'll see how many weeks this lasts. But in all seriousness, welcome back to another edition of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. As, of course, you hear my voice first, I am the man that draws upon the intro for vast amounts of time, but I'm not going to take too much longer this week because we got some breaking news to hit up early in this episode. I myself am the Iceman, and joining me on the screen, beautiful people, our games master, the best pen salesman this side of the Mississippi, and on the other side when he has to travel west, Justin, how we doing?
Good. It's good to be home for a weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, you've been a traveling man here recently.
I'm a traveling man. I'm a traveling salesman, but it's been fun.
Traveling salesman.
It's definitely going to be this week. I can tell you right now, for me, it won't be next week.
Yeah. I was going to say, are we going to have a new modern 21st century version of the traveling salesman book, and are you going to be the author of that book, Justin?
You never know.
Yeah,
keep your eyes peeled.
Keep your eyes peeled. We'll discuss it. Book deals and all that. I'm sure.
Ear to the ground, man.
Sure, there's a blind email that we could send out somewhere that will get to people's ears that will be responded back with a polite "leave us alone." But we will not leave the beautiful people alone here because we are back, ladies and gentlemen. We are back to continue to talk football, as I kind of alluded to on the last episode, because it was just me and the Podfather. We're going to get Justin's takes and thoughts on what transpired with the 2025 NFL draft. Kind of closing final thoughts, really, Justin, because as we've talked about, I feel like we've alluded to it in some of the episodes this spring in particular. Yes, it has been spring for a while, ladies and gentlemen, despite what the weather might make you think. But this spring, we've kind of alluded to it, that come the end of the NFL draft, it's it's the desert of the offseason, Justin, where we're just hoping for morsels of information, for things to pop out, like an oasis in the Sahara before you pass out and ultimately become prey to the vultures. And we have an oasis to talk about here in a couple of moments' time. But before we talk about the breaking news, of course, fun football chaos is the tagline. We have a quick game for a little bit of fun because, ladies and gentlemen, a proper rendition of it this time. It's time for the next installment of Name That Player.
All right, you ready?
Yes, sir.
This former third-round draft pick played for 4 different teams in his NFL career and was drafted out of Virginia.
Virginia Cavalier, third rounder, played for 4 teams. Now, it's always this first one that gets me. When I say the first one they get, yeah, it is the hardest one for a reason.
You get the least information.
Yep. And it, especially when it comes to like the school he went to, because truth be told, after a while, I kind of forget where some of these guys went to for school. A third round pick out of Virginia. Virginia Cavaliers, noted football powerhouse program, obviously. Okay, I'm going to go offense first on this one. And then once it's defensive hints in the second clue, that'll totally show the track I'm on. But I'm going to lean towards offense in this first guess, where I'm going to be completely wrong. Where this guy went. You know what? Let's have a little bit of fun here. I don't think he was a third round pick. He wasn't a first round pick, I don't think. I want to say he was maybe he was a second rounder, so I'm definitely off on the round. But just to bring a name back from the past for the people, definitely didn't go to this school. Definitely maybe not have been a third round pick, but I think he may have played for 4 teams, or at least
you just throw it out. He didn't fit any of the hints.
Yes,
I'm gonna throw a name out
just because we're here to have fun, and we it's a good whole edition of how you doing. Keep it moving. Let's go Alshon Jeffrey for the first guess.
Alshon Jeffrey,
a terrible guess to match any of the qualifications, but a name from the past.
It is a name, and it is from the past. It is not Alshon Jeffrey.
Yeah, we try.
This is a big-bodied player at 6'6", 245 pounds. Originally went to high school in Pennsylvania, where he is from. Lettered in 3 different sports.
Okay.
Before going to Virginia. originally was drafted by the Atlanta Falcons in 2004.
2004, you say? Okay. I'm trying to think of like mid to late 2000s guys that played for the Falcons. Well, there's a name that came. No, hold on. No. He didn't. He didn't go to Virginia. So I'm actually, ladies and gentlemen, in case you're new to the program and how I do things, I for pure jokes, I ignore some of the hints when it comes to stating my first name, and then in the second round, I actually try to buckle up and be a little bit serious. Because the first name that came to mind, when it comes to about early to mid 2000s Atlanta Falcons picks, was Roddy White, but I don't think, as rare as my college football knowledge is, I don't think he went to the University of Virginia. He's how tall was this person?
6'6".
6'6". She marron. Huh. 6'6".
At least according to their Wikipedia.
I was gonna say, man, you know, the little bit of lifts in the combine may have faked it a little bit. 6'6". Because then, I'm starting to think, because this person had to have been around for a bit, 4 teams. Roddy White, I feel like he did leave Atlanta to the end of his career, but it wasn't to 3 other teams. Not Michael Turner. He may have been a career Falcon, actually. Or if he wasn't, it was at that tail end of his career. I'm trying to think of, like, Falcons 2000s offensive lineman. 6'6". Or defensive lineman. Because just on the
teams.
What happened?
Remember, they played for 4 different teams.
And that's the next part where it's like, he wasn't a Falcon. He was also definitely not a third round pick. This is definitely going to be a case where I'm going to need this last round of hints to help me out here.
Mm-hmm.
Again, just so I can at least get the team right. I'll say Roddy White, even though I know it's not correct, but just to get me to the third round, because this is definitely one of those I need the third round to help me.
It is not Roddy White.
Yeah, definitely not.
All right, and now we will tell you that this quarterback,
6'6" quarterback. Okay.
yes, was a 2-time Pro Bowler, a 1-time NFL passing yards leader, and had a career touchdown to interception ratio of 136 to 91. Solid player. Was not known for his days in Atlanta, but another team where he threw to a Hall of Fame candidate receiver. I don't remember if he got in. We did discuss his Hall of Fame candidacy on this show.
Well, thinking of the receivers we've talked about the last 2 years when we talked about the Hall. Well, the Falcons are really good at getting quarterbacks that that didn't end up playing for them
somewhere else,
because they did that in the early '90s with Brett Favre, with the Brett Favre, with Brett Favre, the Ohio State. It just add the to before every name, and it just makes it sound like at least 10% cooler. So, did this guy start to ruin his interception to TD interception count towards the end of his career? Because I think I know who we're talking about now.
I believe we did. I believe it got worse as he went.
that sounds about right. I think I know who. The picture has become very much clearer at this point.
Throw it out there, Jerry.
I never realized he was 6'6", though. I
didn't know either. I just found this out.
Oh, there we go. Matt Schaub.
Matt Schaub is the correct answer.
Wow, 6'6".
6'6", 245, according to his Wikipedia page.
Well, okay, so now it makes sense because you said he lettered in 3 different sports. Boy was 6'6". I imagine the other 2. This feels like the generic thing that I'm guessing basketball and baseball were probably the other 2.
Correct.
Look at that. Oh goodness. I mean, what that kind of sort of when it comes to lettering in basketball, at least that kind of relates to an extent because which team was it? The Chargers? I know there's at least 1 or 2 teams signed some NCAA basketball free agents. I think there was one noted one. It may have been the Chargers. signed a kid who like kind of starred slightly in this past NCAA tournament. We'll probably know that. We'll probably have this more in detail once we get closer to the division previews later in the summer. There you go. But yeah, it's a notable thing. Noted Virginia Cavalier Matt Schaub became Falcon, Texan. I know he was a Raven for a bit, if I'm not mistaken. So what was the fourth team? Was he a Raven for a bit, or am I just having a fever dream?
He was a Raven. Hold on, I gotta go back.
Okay.
I ditched it already.
Falcon.
It was the Raider. He was a Raider.
He was a Raider?
Yeah, for a short time.
Before or after he was a Raven?
Before.
Really?
It was the Falcons, then the Texans, then the Raiders, then the Ravens, and then back to the Falcons.
Right, because I want to say he had to have been Matt Ryan's backup there in some of their final years together in Atlanta.
Yeah.
See that's one of those little things. Remember when we talked about the Matt Nagy to Matt God, what was his name? The heck was the guy who came in Chicago after Matt Nagy? It was Eberflus. It was basically the whole thing of like, you spell out the first name, but you just got to change the last initial on like a plate or a card to save a little bit of coinage there. It's a sneaky little thing you gotta do. Just switch letters around, initials, simple stuff like that. Not like anyone would do that in a more serious thing. There's no reputable company that would put in a fake name or anything like that and then get it changed later. Oh no one would ever do that. Who would do that? Who would do that? Certainly no company based in the Northeast. Anyways, that Schaub is perfect. Well, Justin played in the NFC South. Played for the Raiders at one point. It's almost like unintentionally, this perfectly leads to what we'll be talking about for a good bulk of this episode.
Well, he was traded to the Raiders that year that he was drafted and was eventually benched before the season started in favor of rookie quarterback Derek Carr.
Look at that. Ladies and gentlemen, life is circular, I think. Is it? Who knows? It's more like a F1 racetrack. It just goes around and there's curves and corners. And if you make a mistake, you completely fly off. And that's kind of what his shoulder did, unfortunately, for Derek Carr. The end was nigh, as the joke goes in the title. The rise of a new pope, who's from Chicago. The memes have been plentiful for that. And the fall of a patron saint himself. Derek was thy name. Throwing footballs was thy game. But shoulder health was no longer thy holy divinity. Am I doing this right? Jokes aside, Justin, news that you texted in the chat, and because my notifications are slow, I went on Twitter to try to guess what you were talking about. I saw Carlos Sainz was trending. I'm like, I don't think Justin's talking about Carlos Sainz.
I was not.
And there was an apparent earthquake in Knoxville, which there were memes of either total destruction or lawn chairs briskly moving in a summer day. So I don't know what the extent of the damage is. If it was nothing serious. Nothing serious. If there was damage, I hope everyone is as safe as can be. But moving on, the actual news that we talk about in the show, because we're a football show, allegedly, Derek Carr retired today. It's kind of sort of out of nowhere to a certain extent. Now, we had... this was kind of a thing for us when we were looking at the offseason. We're looking at free agency, or even looking at the draft, and we kind of, to an extent, discussed when it came to our mock draft itself. Of what the Saints were going to do for the future of that position, because there were reports all the way back in March of Derek Carr and that there were issues with his shoulder, that Derek Carr thought that everything was fine because he missed time this past season, right, due to injury. And it was a belief that everything was okay. They had restructured his deal and everything. He had gotten technically, was it a signing bonus? Some sort of bonus in March after they restructured his deal. And everything was perceived to be okay. But after the restructuring, came news that apparently there was a little bit more than met the eye. That now that Derek Carr, per what we learned I think back in March, but also confirmed in him retiring today, was that he started to feel issues in his shoulder when he was throwing again. So everything seemed to be fine, but then when he actually started working out and throwing, started to feel it again, right? Which, if we're being honest, 9 times out of 10, that kind of is the case, and that is what happens. You don't actually know if everything is okay until you start to do the physical activity that you constantly do again before you realize it may not be okay. And after today's announcement, what we learned, I'll read the full paragraph from itself. That sort of restates what I was saying with a little bit more details. That during a football in March for the first time since December, Carr experienced pain in his right shoulder. Medical tests determined that he had sustained a labral tear and had significant degenerative changes to his rotator cuff, according to the team's statement today on his retirement. Now, I'm not a doctor. That doesn't sound fun to deal with, to say the very least. And if it's not fun to just deal with in regular everyday life, it definitely wouldn't have been easy to deal with. Obviously would have required not just intensive surgery and any other procedure that it would have to require, but also you can only imagine the rehab that it would have taken. And obviously, I mean, I'm sure he's still going to get a procedure in some way, shape, or form. I think logic would dictate that. But he's not going to have to worry about rehabbing for football after that because he retired. So Derek Carr, as of today, on trying to get the calendar to work, May 10th, 2025, has elected to end his NFL career. Kind of suddenly, to say the very least. Now I have I think undulated long enough. I don't even know if I'm using correct words anymore, but I've talked very much and given, I think, the necessary detail to the breaking news. Now, Justin, it's time for the reactions for the news. So I'll throw it to you first. We could pick our poison on how we want to address this. I think there's multiple ways that we will get to talking about this, and we will talk about majority of the angles that surround this. Justin, I'll let you be the first one. You can help dictate the conversation along the path here. You want to talk about from the Derek Carr side first, the Saints side, whichever side you want to go to, but just immediate reaction when you saw this, and then the follow-up thoughts that have gone through your brain over the last couple of hours.
It's just it was shocking. I mean, you heard rumblings and rumors throughout the offseason, like you said, but it didn't really get the attention that you thought it might as it went. Clearly, there was some issues as things went last year. I mean, the way they started, just absolutely on fire, was really killing it. And then, like his career, everything kind of just got derailed with injury, and nothing was the same. It's unfortunate for a kid that everyone always thought had so much promise. Nobody really ever had anything bad to say about Derek Carr off the field. And I mean, you look back at his career. I mean, he had a hell of a career, but doesn't always work out. He'll be over 40,000 yards for his career. He's over 250 touchdowns. He's had a pretty solid go of things. It's a shame that this is the way it's got to end, especially the way they thought it might go with that team down in New Orleans, because they do have some real nice weapons and a decent defense down there. And we wish Derek Carr the best of luck, and it's going to be interesting to see now what turns the Saints team makes.
Yeah, to say the very least. And you mentioned for him production, especially the last couple of years, he was actually, you could argue in terms of a TD to interception. I don't even actually think argued, like from a TD interception ratio, it was actually some of the best statistics he was producing from the last couple of years of his career. I think he was a 3-1 each of the last 2 years, essentially, for the Saints. He was 15 touchdowns, 5 interceptions last season. And the year before that, in 2023, he was like 25 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. So he was a 3-1 player consistently in his time with the Saints, which is a pretty good mark, to say the very least, and what you want out of the quarterback, especially in today's modern era. And as you mentioned, from looking at it, we'll take it from his perspective first. Drafted by the Raiders in the second round, with you mentioning Matt Schaub and bringing that back to the forefront. I don't think necessarily in 2014 there was too much of an expectation of him to start right away, but he essentially did. he started right away, started all 16 games for the team. It was a terrible Raiders team, to say the very least. But you had at least a bright spot. And again, it's funny you mention it, and we're going to talk about another second-round quarterback here in a bit, because that's the situation the Saints are going to find themselves in here, Justin. Derek Carr was picked in the second round, usurping Virginia Cavalier great Matt Schaub, and then took it from there. A decent rookie season at the start of his career. 3-13 team, improved the Raiders by 4 wins, in his second year. Got up to 32 touchdowns on the season, flirted with a 4,000-yard passing season. 12-3 record his third year, and maybe I don't know how much we want to get into it now. Maybe this will be one of those later, we'll talk about maybe later in the summer, next summer, even when there's more time for a mini retrospective, because we do want to have some fun with stuff like that. But it's the 2016 Derek Carr season and the Raiders season, Justin. The 12-3 start, the winning of the division, and everything was good. he was all but a lock to definitely be considered strongly in the MVP conversation. Had 28 touchdowns for himself, 6 interceptions. Had he been able to play the last week, probably would have crossed the 4,000-yard passing mark there, and that would have been the first time in his career that he would have done that. But it was for naught because he got hurt. And that Raiders season, which to this point, is essentially the most amount of wins that the Raiders have had in not just in his time, but like ever since. Like no Raiders team has ever been able to surpass that 12-win season. Well, 12 wins with him. I forget if they won that final game without him. But no Raiders team has ever been able to surpass that win total, especially in the post-Derek Carr era. They've come nowhere near that because of how good he played that year. And unfortunately, they go into the postseason, and I don't even think it was the backup, which I want to say was McGloin at that point. They had to go with the third stringer out of Michigan State, Connor Cook. Never forget the Connor Cook game in the postseason. That just absolutely tore down what was a legitimately interesting team. Again, I think the 2016 Raiders and 2016 Derek Carr will definitely be something that we go into more retrospect deeper, maybe into this summer, to give a little bit of credence, because that was going to be an interesting playoff with a healthy Raiders team. If it only would have been Amari Cooper, Khalil Mack. There's a lot to talk about and unpack in that one. But, after that moment, it was just tough going for him. And it was just bad management, bad coaching overall. Started to get a couple 4,000-yard passing seasons for himself. Peaked, to say the very least, in 2021 at 4,804 passing yards. Career high in both attempts and completions. That was the infamous Rich Bisaccia interim head coach season in 2021. They get to the postseason. They get to the wild card game. And they were, let's be real, I'm a Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow guy, but they were a essentially perceived phantom whistle call, whistle/non-whistle away from potentially winning that game, because that was the situation that happened. It was a very close end of game scenario. And that was the same postseason where the Cincinnati Bengals, where did they go? Oh, they made it to the Superb Owl.
Yeah, that's a what could have been kind of season for them. That's going to be what Derek Carr is remembered for, though, unfortunately for him. It's going to be what could have been.
Seriously. And after that 2021 season, we've talked about it on this show, Justin. They choose not to keep Rich Bisaccia. They go with McDaniels. And this is another one of those hindsight 2020 things, but you could tell immediately that the plan was never to have Derek Carr there for the long term. The plan was never going to be for him to be the quarterback there with Josh McDaniels. The whole plan was to make the situation as uncomfortable as possible. Even with bringing in a guy like Davante Adams, the situation was just to never really let loose the offense the way it could have been. A better, more competent head coach would have been able to do it with Derek Carr and Davante Adams. But obviously Josh McDaniels, as we've seen, is definitely not a competent head coach in any way, shape, or form, especially with AFC West teams. But he ends up having to part ways with the Raiders because it just became untenable for him personally. It's very obvious and easy that an organization can make things uncomfortable for you. And the dude goes to the New Orleans Saints. He was meant to be the kind of solution to what was weeks and weeks of, years of trying to find a solution to the Drew Brees-less Saints era, because they were kind of in a limbo, to say the very least, when Drew Brees left. And while Derek Carr, obviously not Drew Brees, let's get that out of the way first before anyone tries to comment and be funny, but a good player, a decent player, and a stable, I've had my critiques of him on this show in the past, yes, but I've never questioned he was a steady-handed, stable quarterback. And he was that in New Orleans. And Justin, you said it yourself. What if, expand a little bit on it for what the start of this past season was? Because truthfully, man, I'm not going to say they would have been a dangerous team. I really think the Saints the last 2 years were just a coach away. I really think they were a coach away on both occasions. And talk about, before we get to this unfortunate news and then lead to the next aspect of the conversation, talk a little bit about Derek Carr's, you could sort of call it a resurgence. He was a good Saint, Justin. Not for nothing.
Depends who you ask, I think, because he was also a bad Saint. You know what I mean? There was not.
For sure.
he had a ton of really, really good, and he had a ton of really, really bad. And again, unfortunately, you have to think part of it is because of the injuries. But it's hard, man. It's hard to say what he really was there. I mean, if you look at the beginning of the season, it looked like they might win a Super Bowl. They were destroying teams, and granted, they weren't the best teams in the league, but they were making them look like they didn't belong, which is a different thing than, just beating up on a bad team. it's I don't know where you go from here, honestly. Like it's a tough one. I know they drafted a quarterback whose name I can't remember at the moment.
Tyler Shuck.
Yes. But like, is he your answer? Or are you going to try and, sign one of the quarterbacks that's out there currently? I mean, there is one or two left. One that's also contemplating retirement right now, as Rick has pointed out in the group chat. It's I don't know where you go from here for them. That's a tough one. They might have to go full reset at some point because it's not like they free up a little cap space, but it's not like they had a really, really great cap situation to begin with. They have a lot of players that are good players, but like, where do they fit on a championship roster? Like, how are you constructed, and what do you expect this go around? There's going to be a lot of question marks going into the season for this team.
Yeah, to say the very least. And question numero uno that you'll hope that you have the answer to is who is going to be the starting quarterback for this team and what is going to be the situation for this team into the season. Because Derek Carr is not the only New Orleans Saints player who retired, because earlier in the offseason, before the draft, we got the official retirement of Ryan Ramczyk, who was a very good Saint in his time, very solid player, but injuries ultimately caught up to him. I believe he missed it was all the 2024 season. I don't think he suited up for a game. If he did, it was like one lone game and then was out the rest of the year. But this is a Saints team that, you mentioned the key words there, Justin, that it makes fans shudder to this day at cap space. This team has been in cap purgatory for what feels like nearly a decade now. They are one of the inspirations of me constantly saying that the salary cap is a social construct, because it is. Because the New Orleans Saints every single offseason have never been in a cap flexible situation, have always had to deal with issues, have always had to, make finesse move after finesse move, and get guys to restructure deals. Even when it comes to, bringing the rookies in and like the extensions the rookies, like the recent rookies have signed, and doing that and this, that, and the third. But finally, is there a little bit of flexibility there? Because like you said, this frees up $30 million of cap space on a team that had to really operate very seldomly this offseason. Can't think of too many notable signings they made pre-draft, because the plan was to bring in a loaded and steady draft class, and that comes in with cap space to need to be freed up anyway. So they get $30 million, like you said. We could maybe talk about what they could do here in a couple of moments, but the number one thing is going to be the quarterback situation. And ironically enough, the three quarterbacks that are on this team now remaining are all on rookie deals. Well, did one of the guys get moved to the practice squad and then brought back? Hey, either way, Jake Haener, Spencer Rattler, and now Tyler Shuck. Three guys who were all drafted, two extremely late picks, one very surging surprise second round pick in Shuck, who came up draft boards extremely late in the process, to say the very least, after a college career where he essentially did not play a majority of the time he was in college. Like, he didn't really get a lot of time until this past year in 2024 with Louisville. This is a guy who was at Oregon, Texas Tech, and Louisville. So aside from the 3 degrees, apparently, it's three teams, 3 sets of playing. I think he was Bo Nix's backup, if I'm not mistaken. I think people were saying, like, in that 2020 season. I could be wrong, or something along the lines. There's some connection to Bo Nix, or maybe even not Bo Nix, maybe the quarterback before Bo Nix is what it was that I saw. But essentially, like, this guy's kind of long in the tooth, to say the very least. And it is not anything easy. Actually, talking about it, that 2020 season where he actually played a little bit, real quick, because I have the 2020 Ducks roster pointed up. You know who one of the tackles on that team was in 2020, Justin? Mm-hmm. Penei Sewell. This Penei Sewell just got extended within the past year or so for being one of the best tackles in football. And now a guy who was on the same roster when the year Penei Sewell was drafted is now just getting into the NFL. So this is the quarterback situation. I saw a video of Tyler Shuck. Now we can essentially move on to I feel like we talked plenty of Derek Carr. Now we could talk about the Saints portion of this, Justin, and you began the conversation. Let's focus strictly on quarterback first. Is there any chance it's not Tyler Shuck essentially starting for for this team in week one? Like, I know you mentioned potential free agent moves they could make. One guy in particular who we're all still waiting on, which, in the words of the Podfather, go away. But we're waiting on one man in particular. Like, do you see a scenario right now where, especially, let's also remember it's a new coach, right? New Orleans, Dennis Allen was kicked to the curb, and they got old buddy. He was the Eagles' offensive coordinator this past year, former Dallas Cowboys offensive coordinator, former Chargers offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore. It took me a while to remember his name. Do you see any way that it's not Tyler Shuck starting this season?
I mean, I would think not. Right? I mean, there's a chance that if it was the same regime, that I would say maybe it's Spencer Rattler. But like, this is his picked guy so far, right?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they come in next year and they say we'll get a quarterback together. But obviously, this is not what you want for the start of your supposed quarterback whisperer, new head coach. Like, this is a rough go of things. Like I said, maybe they go out and they sign a guy like Rodgers, but I don't think that really helps their team at this point either. I don't necessarily know that they're a quarterback away. They might be. They're a good team on paper, but they have their issues and deficiencies. Like, we don't know what this team can be, even with a quarterback.
Correct.
So, I mean, yeah, it's a really interesting situation. I mean, if they're looking to hire, I'll be happy to give them some ideas. I don't know. Off the top of my head, I don't know.
No, it's very interesting, and that's why for me, I'm almost wondering if the answer is not even to look outward for a quarterback necessarily, but more to look outward for extra support for what is likely going to be a situation where it would be shocking if Tyler Shuck doesn't win it, unless they want to protect him for a week or two, give him a slightly bit more time, and you just throw either Rattler or Haener to the Wolves, especially Rattler, who's a guy who his NFL journey has been something to say the very least. But you look at the rest of the Saints roster here, pulling it up. You still have Alvin Kamara, who just barely staying in New Orleans. I think he was a deal that had to be reworked or at least convinced to return. Chris Olave, when he's not being thrown into double coverage to be absolutely blasted by defensive backs, is going to be your number one wide receiver. With a man who has been whose praises have been sung on this podcast before, ladies and gentlemen. Rashid Shaheed is on this team. The veteran,
big Rashid Shaheed guy. I've always been a big Rashid Shaheed guy.
Indeed, you have. They have a guy there who is returning to the team that originally drafted him many years ago, and that's Brendan Cooks, is back in New Orleans once again. You have Jawan Johnson, who's there. A young offensive line with Talisi Fuego, Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, Nick Saldiveri, Trevor Penning. Like, these are all guys who have been drafted and brought into the league over the last, I think 5 years is probably the most amount of experience. So that's a relatively young offensive line you have there. It's the defense with the likes of Demario Davis and Cameron Jordan. Again, two guys that I believe Cameron Jordan especially had to be kind of coerced, isn't the right word, coaxed into putting one more season in New Orleans, in the Bayou, in Baton Rouge for them. Chase Young was signed, as we know, was brought in. They're hoping for a big year out of him. The defensive secondary, Tyrann Mathieu and Justin Reed, of course, they had to follow the successive path with one another from Texan to Chief to Saint. If I had a nickel for every time, I'd have two, which isn't a lot, but it's weird to tap in twice. The two of them being together in that backfield, Alante Taylor and Kool-Aid McKinstry, because they said bye to a couple of names, if I'm not mistaken, from last year's defensive secondary. I think Paulson Adebo was a guy who he left. I think he signed with the Giants, if I'm not mistaken, or with an NFC East team, but he's not there anymore. So there's really a lot, to say the very least, that has changed on this team, even aside from the quarterback. And that's why I'm not even for myself entertaining the thought of bringing in a quarterback, unless it's like a veteran to really just because you need a veteran there. Like, I think Haener has the most experience, and that's not really saying much in that quarterback room. Like, it probably would make sense if one is available to bring in like an older quarterback that's still out there on the market to just strictly be like, show the kids how this is done, how you handle the locker room, how you're supposed to lead things. But I think Tyler Shuck is probably going to end up just being the guy here, forthright, barring either. Yeah, no, 100%. Like that's what I'm saying. Like I'm strictly, because before you have a long-term plan, you got to look at what you have now, right? And I think if you're the Saints, you kind of have to look at 2025 as its own thing. You're not going to get to 2026 or 2027 before you cross 2025. And on a team that already has a lot of older guys on it, it's a weird mix, right? Because I just mentioned the offensive line is pretty young. That defense is kind of old. Like there's a lot that needs to be done with this team that it's not going to be solved in one or heck even 2 seasons. This is going to be a multi-year project. And the first answer you kind of need is if the quarterback of the future is in any way, shape, or form there. And this is a chance for these younger guys to try to make a name for themselves. But to what I was saying is that maybe an older quarterback to come in, just be that veteran, be that mentor, be that not even placeholder because probably wouldn't play. But I think it's a chance to look at other positions, Justin. And I'm not even saying this from the perspective of like, if they add this one guy, it's going to make a difference for them in terms of being a 5-win team to somehow winning the NFC South. But just gets like an influx of talent in there, just get a little bit of support just to help out, whether it be Shuck or even though there's still, we haven't done, we sort of did this in our last free agency related episode, but there's still a good amount of names on the market, a couple names that you got $30 extra million. You throw 1 or 2 decent 1-year deals at some of these guys, maybe 2-year deals if you want them to be part of the Band-Aid like the Panthers did. Think about it. Panthers with Adam Thielen. I would say Jadeveon Clowney, but he's not a Panther anymore. What the Titans did with DeAndre Hopkins, right? Mm-hmm. And kind of that promise of, hey, come here, we'll pay you. You're going to get your money for a bit, help this team out for a year and a half, and we'll trade you at the deadline in 2026 to a team that you can actually have a chance to win with. Like we could end up seeing a deal like that. Like I have to imagine or assume, and if I'm a Saints fan, I'm hoping that this is probably something that the organization has expected for a bit. This probably was the fuel behind them drafting Shuck's second round to begin with, because the sudden hype of him in the draft kind of came out of nowhere to an extent that you need to question, like, where did this come from? And if there was really any other team in the second round that was going to draft him, because I could be wrong. I think it was the only second round quarterback taken. We know a couple other quarterbacks that were taken in the third round, Jalen Milroe, Dylan Gabriel. We know there was a quarterback taken in the 5th round, which I'd love to get your thoughts on here in a little bit, Justin. But in terms of there being a guy that was taken in the second round, I could be wrong. I think Tyler Shuck was the only second round QB taken. So with that being said, ball's in the kid's court. And the Saints have a chance here to use the cap space that they get now from Derek Carr, which you mentioned it before, $30 million freed up, right? You can bring in a couple names here that aren't necessarily, maybe not long-term fixes in terms of 3, 4, 5+ years, but can at least bring in some stability to this team, because I kind of think that's what they need more than anything, don't you think?
Definitely. You just got to hope that this kid is, the stabilizing factor there. I mean, like you said, you pretty much covered it. But yeah, it's a situation down in New Orleans.
No. Go Tigers, go Saints. But this is essentially like just something to look at of, you get, again, curveball to us, maybe not to them. Maybe they've known for a couple weeks now that this was going to happen.
I think that it was, as the time went on, it became increasingly
obvious.
Likely, to them.
Yeah. I mean, if it's one thing we want to do here really quick, and I'm trying to think of names off the top of my head, remaining free agents, Justin, that again, we're not saying that any of these guys, if they sign with the Saints are going to magically turn around and they're going to become the absolute best of the best. But, we think about it, like Gabe Davis, we were actually talking about in the chat, right? He recently signed with the New York Football Giants. So he's going to be a guy that, that's where he is. You think about some of the names that are available here. Of course, the first one that people are going to go to kind of as a joke more than anything is Aaron Rodgers. But I think just in terms of secondary, I just actually stated 2 safeties, so I don't think they need a safety. But just like the likes of these players, Justin Simmons is available. If you want to keep looking at the defense, like Kazir White, Rasul Douglas, Stephon Gilmore, like guys like that as like temporary stopgaps. I think Brendan Scherf, if you want to bring in a veteran on the offensive line because you have so much youth there, I don't know if he'll necessarily supplant any of these guys in terms of starting over them, but just bring in a veteran presence like him. You want to talk about some wide receivers, Justin, if I'm reading this correctly, the likes of Keenan Allen and Amari Cooper are both available. and in a wide receiver room where Chris Olave is that definitive number one guy. And Rashid Shaheed, while there has been promise with him, and this is a big Rashid Shaheed podcast, especially between you and the Podfather, like it doesn't hurt to maybe bring in another guy. And like I mentioned, it could be a D-Hop type deal to maybe more for Cooper than the other guys. But like, could we not see maybe like a 2-year kind of rich deal for Cooper? Most of the money is here in year one, and then he gets dealt at some point in the second year of the deal as a thank you for helping us out for this 1 year. Now go win a championship for yourself.
Pretty much.
Yeah, like
that's a good idea.
Yeah, because if you're the Saints now, you kind of just have to. I don't even want to say scramble, because I think we both agree that they probably have realized this for a couple weeks now, and so it's just about like what they're going to do. Like this is not the. I don't think we're going to see a situation here, unless it's just really long negotiations. I think. Tell me your thoughts here, Justin. Like obviously for today and maybe for this week, but would it really surprise you if in the next 2-3 weeks we hear some news of some Saints signings now? Just to plug up this team.
Well, they have a lot more cap space now, right? They saved $10 million in cap space.
Yeah. So it's something to watch out for, to say the very least. Like this is a Saints team that, again, I don't want to start a little preview of the division preview, so we're not going to preview a preview here, but we maybe don't have a lot of faith in their season for 2025. Whether pre-Derek Carr retirement announcement or not, because even if he wasn't going to retire, and this is the thing for him, is that he was going to have to rehab no matter what. He was likely going to be put on the PUP list, just like recently Brooks was for the Panthers, right? Like Derek Carr was unlikely to play football in 2025 no matter what.
Yeah.
He's now just never going to play ever again. That's the main difference. And so now you have a situation here, Justin, where this is a Saints team that could, and again, I could be wrong, but I just don't remember them making too many signings in the pre-draft free agency. Maybe we could see a flurry of signings for them. Like I know I listed a couple of names here. Like
I don't know who they would really go after now, and what it would do for them, really. Because if you think about it, like, yeah, now they can make moves, but why? Your salary cap situation was a mess to begin with.
Yeah,
you have a new regime. Just take the hit. Right? Why not just stay pat, deal with what you got to deal with this year, see if you have anything in this kid, and then get some people off the books next year, see where your draft pick is going to be, and move forward with kind of a reset. Right?
Yeah. No, I'm not disagreeing with you. It's just like when we're in a situation like this, it's like anything can happen at this moment. The Saints could do nothing. And they could do exactly what you're saying of like, all right, now like recalibrate and refigure with everything. Or there could be maybe now with this extra space, and they don't need to use all 30. If anything, they should be smart. They should try to keep most of that as much as they can. But like if there's a smart move to be made, like I maybe it's just me, and I also don't have a full list of names available in front of me, so I don't know who else there is aside from Mr. Number 12, Mr. Ayahuasca and Dolphin Sonar Rehab himself. I think at minimum what they could do at least is maybe get just an older quarterback to be the veteran there. Like that at least is the bare minimum thing they should do. And it doesn't need to be free agency. Like maybe ship off a 6th or 7th round pick for a guy who he's not going to be like much to the team, but just to be a guy there.
I would call up the Giants. I mean, they have a very crowded QB room. I'd call up the Browns too. They have a very crowded QB room.
Kenny Pickett's Super Bowl champion. Joe Flacco, old man Joe. Although I mean, they just signed him back, so they're probably going to want to be keen on keeping him.
Yeah.
Do the Minnesota Vikings have a random veteran backup quarterback that they could part ways with?
I don't remember, but I thought they did have like a couple of veterans there now.
So there's certainly discussions to be had. I mean, I feel like Drew Lock has already been dealt at least one time this offseason. Why not bring him? Good old my guy, shooter sleeve Drew Lock from the early 2020s. It's my guy right there. Never forget him coming out of Mizzou. Kid just had all swagger. He would sing along with like the lyrics that were like of the songs that they were just bumping in the arena. Dude was just absolute pure energy personified. I love me some Drew Lock, to say the very least. No, there's this is a fluid. I think Justin, tell me not fluid is the way to describe the situation in New Orleans right now. It's very like there's nothing concrete that they need to do that they have to do. It's just an evaluation period at this point, essentially.
Yeah. It's honestly, I can't tell if it's a good thing or a bad thing for Kellen Moore either. Like, does this year automatically mean that like it's like a wash? Like, does he
Mm.
get another extra year because this is not what he signed up for? It's gonna be
It
interesting.
could. It could, and it's very well a thing that he could use to essentially talk about it and say, like, hey, like, I'm not getting to work with a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback like I was originally supposed to. And like you mentioned, like he was drafted in the second round was Tyler Shuck. Um, with being drafted in the second round, it's not a high cap hit. There's no fifth year option they have to worry about. If there was, they probably would have declined it if it just didn't work out. Like, there's no big thing that is tying you to any of the quarterbacks you have. And if anything, I kind of like you said, I kind of agree with you. I think this essentially is maybe just a freebie year for Kellen Moore to an extent. Maybe not freebie is the word, but
Well, but essentially,
yeah. But it just more is like 36-year-old first year head coach. Now he gets to really dive into it, and this could be a see what the overall situation is on the rest of the roster. Like we said, like we know Chris Olave is the number one. Are there any other wide receivers there that like it can Rashichi prove to be a definitive, reliable number two, or do you need to bring an outside guy in? Not now. I'm saying even this is where you start to think about next offseason. And is there that? Are you fine with Jamal Johnson just being tight end forever at this point? What are your offensive linemen like? Are these kids finally going to like McCoy and Ruiz are on extensions now, so they're settled, they're fine. You've drafted 3 different offensive linemen the last couple of years. Can Trevor Penning solidify being a guy? Can the kid you drafted a kid this year, you drafted a kid last year? Like they have put a lot of draft capital into this O line. Can they understand your schemes? Can they protect? No matter who the quarterback is, the offensive linemen have to protect, right? Can these guys be reliable offensive linemen for you? Especially because Penning was a first round pick, because I remember he was in our draft look back, in one of our previous draft look backs for him, and he did not grade out favorably, to say the very least, in part because he had a injury riddled rookie season, which tends to be the thing that just kills most offensive linemen in their rookie campaigns. I mean, if you're the Saints, is there one too many Tylers over in Dallas that maybe you could steal from? But no, in all seriousness, like so for Kellen Moore, it's like looking at his offense, he's just like, okay, like this is an experimentation year. This is like guinea pig on the wheel, gerbil in the maze type of thing, where let's see who figures it out. What I want to do, who can understand it. I think it can be a big year. And also, not from the Kellen, who would have thought the Kellen Moore perspective was going to be one of the things we talk about. I think if you are Kellen Moore here, Justin, I think one of the underrated things that this kind of gives you is kind of early lessons in terms of helping motivate your guys through a full 17-game season that he'll get to do as a head coach. Because let's be real, Saints are probably not going to be that good. And it's going to be an early test for a young head coach like himself to understand how to motivate these guys past a bad season. Like, I think because you bring it up, I'll let you have the final say on this, but what this could be, you kind of said, like, blessing in disguise really for Moore. And what 2025 could be for him in terms of rough year for the team record, but good year for little things he could pick up as a coach.
I say this, there's teams like this every year. And this is the way I look at it is this is who's going to be here next year season. Who's going to be here for the long haul and who is on their way out. That's what this season is.
Yep.
For Kellen Moore, to see who's going to be on his team next year.
Yeah.
You want a spot? Prove it.
Yeah. And realistically, like if you're the players on this team, and specific players when we refer to this, because it's like obviously Cam Jordan he's going to probably retire after this year. This is probably going to be the last year of his career. I think he had to be convinced to come back for this anyway, so he's probably going to end up retiring after this year.
He could still retire now.
Very true. Actually, we may get a Cam Jordan retirement.
I came back to this. See y'all.
Well, like there's certain guys where it's like they're set to an extent. Like Chris Olave is going to be the number one wide receiver on this team unless he demands a trade in any way, shape, or form. Like it's not just for Kellen Moore. It's like we talked about this. You said we do this every year. I remember 2 years ago before the 2023 season, or was it 2022? It was before either 2022 or 2023 when we talked about the Texans, right? And how it's not just for the coaches, it's the players that there's motivation for. Because you have a situation where if you put good tape out there, someone's going to take a chance on you. If you have a really good season, someone could pay you. One of these younger guys, if they could break out for the Saints, if they're maybe in a contract year, whether it be with the Saints or someone else, depending on the position, you put up 7-8 sacks, you get 3-4 interceptions, you get 700-900 yards either in the air or on the ground. There's something for you. There's something for you to do this season. So they're going to be a bad team, but there's no reason they should be a lazy team or an unmotivated team, because I think just from a personal level, and this is, I think, Justin, you can agree with this. I think a lot of people forget about this when it comes to sports in the NFL. There's a lot of guys on these rosters. There's a lot of different guys who have a lot of different motivations. I think a lot of people in New Orleans right now, obviously this hurts the team success perspective, but from a personal perspective, there's a lot of guys that should be gearing up right now and look at 2025 as a make it year for them when it comes to their careers.
Absolutely.
So to say the very least. So kind of the last perspective I was thinking we were going to talk, and we've already spoken about him a couple times here already, Justin, but the second round pick, the shock second round pick of Tyler Shuck.
Yeah. When I woke up this morning, that's not who I was expecting to talk about all day.
To say the very least. We did not expect a New Orleans Saints-centric show, to say the very least, but this is what happens when you're deep in the doldrums of the NFL offseason. This will be perfect because, again, we wanted to get your thoughts on the draft to begin with. So this will be that perfect transition when we'll talk about him from a Saints perspective to then the rest of the draft. But let's speak strictly on the Saints perspective first, if I can finish my sentences properly. Tyler Shuck is now going to definitively be the guy. At least we believe. Let's assume right now. Let's assume at this moment right now, the plan is for Tyler Shuck to be the starting quarterback for 2025 and as much of the season as it can be. What does he do? Like what with him being drafted as high up as he was, and I say as high up because, again, he may not have been a first round pick, and not a lot of people expect him to be a second round pick until like maybe 2-3 weeks before the draft. If you're Tyler Shuck, talk about motivation. This is a big deal for him, to say the very least.
Absolutely. Thrust into a starting role a little bit sooner than they anticipated. I mean, you really don't know what he knew going into the season, into the process, and what he knew over the last couple of weeks, but it's going to be interesting to see. This is kind of the more you read about this kid, the more he kind of seems what Kellen Moore was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he is. I mean, he's just kind of like Dak or Jalen, really. I mean, he's a bigger bodied quarterback that can run and throw off platform throws and work in a moving pocket, but could throw the ball down the field at the same time. So it's going to be interesting to see how they develop and what they decide to do with him right out of the gate, because they're going to have to, they're going to have a game plan, because people are going to be gunning for the kid. You were right in saying that they did invest in an offensive lineman, which should help. They did get a tight end later in the draft, which should help. And then they went almost all defense outside of that. So look, they're gonna rely heavily on their defense. They're gonna let this quarterback come in and develop, and they got their fingers crossed that this kid works out.
Yeah, and hey, if he's not, then it's gonna be interesting. Top 3 selections in the year 2026, and what that quarterback draft class is potentially promising to be, to say the very least.
Yep.
I think funny enough, I think when he was drafted, I saw the graphic that Tyler Shuck is only one of 2 quarterbacks to ever be drafted in the first 2 rounds by the Saints. And the other one, yeah, that's what I remember seeing. And I think the other one was Archie Manning. I think that literally the other one was Arch Manning's grandfather, who maybe this time next year there could be a third draft first round / second round quarterback by the Saints, and it could end up being the same last name as the first one. So it's a lot of potential on what could happen down in New Orleans, in the Bayou. Go Tigers, go Saints. In the Ed Orgeron expression, I could literally only do the one line. I think trying to do an impression of his voice would absolutely just kill, to say the very least. So Justin, you mentioned the draft. You mentioned what the rest of the Saints draft was, and they did go all line again. They did get a tight end, and what they built. Well, let's talk a little bit more about draft, man, because you weren't here when we reviewed it immediately. So now we get there's been time. You've gotten to think about it. These will obviously be the most refined draft takes that were said on the show, to say the very least. But no, and also
I was playing catch up all week. I didn't even get to watch the draft this year. I was dying. It was tough.
So Justin, what was expected to happen first happened first. Cam Ward went first overall. Some people had Abdul Carter mocked there. Some people, some podcasts,
One or two.
but one or two, on top of that. But Cam Ward went first overall, as expected for him to be. And then everything changed from that moment on, to say the very least. So obviously, we're not going to recap all 257 picks in this. I'm sorry, I know you were planning to do that. But let's maybe think of some of the more immediate ones. Let's think of the second overall pick and what the Jaguars did with Travis Hunter. Were you shocked that someone traded up to second overall when it happened? Because the majority of this, we live reacted. We were chatting with each other. Were you shocked that someone actually made the move up to second overall in any way, or was it what you expected and you were maybe shocked that it was Hunter and not Carter? That was what was your mindset when you saw the Jags trade up?
Well, when I first saw, I think I saw right away that it was the Jags, because I didn't just see it was a trade. So right away I knew they weren't trading up for a quarterback, which is what we had discussed previously. Right. I assumed it was going to be for Carter, believe it or not. Although I there's nothing wrong with trading up for Hunter. I'm just an edge rusher guy. I thought that Carter on that team would be nasty next to Josh Hines-Allen.
Yeah. I know you're trying to think of the Georgia player that they drafted first overall a couple years ago.
No, I wasn't. I don't think about him very often. No, I think. I mean, it fits two needs. I just don't know what they're going to do, and I worry about teams that say that he's going to play every snap, because eventually this is a game that wears down on you, man.
Yeah.
And with athletes and players and kids like this, the league is better while they're playing. So I just worry that that team is going to run him into the ground. I don't know what Jacksonville's plan is for him. They did draft a couple of secondary players later in the draft. Caleb Branshaw out of Tulane and Rayun Lane out of Navy.
Mm-hmm.
I am curious to see what side of the ball he's really going to make the impact on.
Right.
That's really what it comes down to. How are you going to use Travis Hunter? Why are you going to use Travis Hunter there? And is he going to make the impact that we think he can make?
Yeah, to say the very least. And I think when he was drafted, ultimately we kind of expected it, right? Like, even though in our mock draft, I didn't pick him at second overall, just because I just felt like in Cleveland, especially, his career was going to really be ran into the ground. That was a situation where in Jacksonville, it is a likely situation and scenario of he is going to have to play a little bit on both sides. But like you're saying, we want them to do the right thing, do the smart thing, and maybe go a little bit more on one end over the other when it comes to that. And with a player as talented as him, I don't doubt that he can excel at either one of those things. I'm just like you, probably everyone's concerned that there's going to be letting this go on for too long in terms of trying to let him do both. I think he could probably do it for one season, maybe two. But like you said, this game and this goes all the way back to college, where, I mean, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, and running backs are like the top three guys of like the wear and tear starts from your college career. And that's why when these guys get in the league, they want to get their money as quick as possible, because that first big contract may be the only one you get. And it kind of happens more often than we think it does. So for a guy like Travis Hunter, I'm all in agreement. I want a kid like him, a dynamic kid like him, to play as long as possible. But is that going to happen? Now, Liam Cohen and Duval are hopefully going to be able to do that. Trevor Lawrence, Brian Thomas Jr., ETN. You hope that the logic is maybe focus him in a little bit more offensively than defensively. Still give him a couple defensive snaps here and there just for the freak athlete that he is, but he can make an impact potentially on offense. He was a really good really good at doing that in his college days, and it goes from there. And from Travis Hunter going second overall, the Browns ended up they traded down. They got a first round pick for next year, and they got themselves Mason Graham. Clicked, and the Giants they sat pretty. They took Abdul Carter, no problem. Like the Giants, you could argue, and you could bring up their next first round pick selection that they made later in the first round. They came away like bandits in this one. They had a pretty good draft, to say the very least.
Absolutely. I mean, when you get arguably the best player in the draft and you're the third pick, it's never really a bad thing. That Giants defensive line is going to be absolutely nasty this year. Just across the board, they have killers that are going to be coming after you. They're going to be gunning. You're going to have to get that ball out quick when you play the Giants. The question is, what are they going to do on offense? Clearly, they're better than they were last year on offense. But where do these quarterbacks fit in? Is Russ the starter? Does Jameis back him up? Is Jackson Dart going to be relevant this year? Is he a project? I was shocked that they went out and they drafted a quarterback, that they traded up and gave away assets to draft a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I guess that means ownership still believes in their staff. But shoot, I was shocked by the situation.
Right. Right. Especially because, as we talked about on the show, and as Bars was one to bring up when we had him react to this, because I asked him for his Giants draft analysis, is that got two quarterbacks there. He's going to learn from both of them in some. I mean, maybe Justin, we just talked about Derek Carr and the Saints. Maybe the Saints make a little bit of a call to the New York Football Giants. Maybe it's time for famous Jameis's return to Louisiana, and the turnovers can be freshly made in New Orleans again. But in all seriousness, it's probably going to end up being a situation where Jackson Dart is likely going to sit majority of the 2025 campaign. But yeah, like you'll take that there. Clearly, they were impressed with Jackson Dart, to say the very least. Not just with on the field, but also the way he conducted himself. Like, I think the big thing for me that they talked about, which is like, I always find it funny when this gets mentioned for guys. I'm not saying this isn't a positive, but like they called him like essentially a psycho competitor. Like he wants to win at everything. He wants to win at like even small games.
That's what you need.
No, yeah, 100%. Especially at the quarterback position. Like you need a guy that wants to win every single freaking time he goes out there. You want a guy that wants to win at everything.
Yeah.
Because that's the name of the game.
The game.
I mean, there's so much to be able to go through here. Justin, one of the hits, I think we had 3 or 4 exact hits in terms of pick, team, and player, and maybe a couple, ones here and there for ourselves in terms of maybe a player going to a team in our mock draft. But this is, I think, the first one that we did, which was Ashton Genty to the Raiders, was a slam dunk. You got it there for us in the mock, Justin. You were the first absolutely perfect pick for us. So talk about Ashton Genty and his soon-to-be Raiders career that's going to blossom. It made sense. What do you think is the baseline expectation for Genty in Vegas this season?
He's going to be a workhorse. They're going to give him the ball early. They're going to give him the ball often. Think Marshawn Lynch. That's what they brought him in to be there. That's where Pete Carroll had his success. Obviously, he believes in Geno Smith because they traded for Geno there as well.
Yep.
So it's going to be interesting. They addressed a lot of different things. They had a lot of different picks. They brought in another quarterback in Cam Miller out of North Dakota State late in the draft. They brought in a few bigger-bodied receivers. They drafted Jack Beck, 6'1", 214 pounds, out of TCU. They drafted Dante Thornton Jr., who's 6'5", 205 pounds, out of Tennessee. They're going to really do what they can to revamp that offense. I mean, look, they even drafted a couple of linemen. I mean, obviously, some of that is what this team needed because there was a lot of issues specifically on offense last year. Defense was its own thing, but all of a sudden they have a much better outlook offensively than they did last year. I mean, they're already better at quarterback. They are arguably better at running back and receiver. They were already electric at tight end.
Yeah.
And now they have some decent and deep offensive line play. Let's see what that offense could be, and then they'll work on the defense. But for now, It looks like a decent start there, and I was going to say Oakland, Las Vegas.
Yeah, Brock Bowers, Ashton Genty. There's some weapons to play around with there, to say the very least. They could be a sneaky offensive team.
Don't forget
That's for
Jacoby
certain.
Meyer. He's a sneaky receiver.
Yeah, it's very true. Very true. Tyler Warren was drafted 14th overall by the Indianapolis Colts, much to the fanfare on the Pat McAfee show when it happened. So he's going to be there over in Indy. He did not go to the original team that we had him in our mock, which was the New York Jets at 7th overall. The New York Jets did end up going offense. They just went among the offensive line, and they picked Armand Membo out of Missouri. Now I'm going to force you to talk about this per your freaking contract, so you got to give me a real answer here. Were you over, under, or just whelmed by the Jets' first round pick and just the Jets draft in general? Like, did you like the picks overall? What was your thought behind the selections?
Whelmed is a good word for that. I mean, I like Armand Membo. It's a good draft pick. It's a solid start to this new regime. For the first time in a while, I actually kind of feel decent about the Jets' offensive line. It was built the right way. They still have Olufushanu from last year. They still have Elijah Vera Tucker from a couple years ago. Armand Membo is a good, really good right tackle. He's big. He's strong. He'll do good things there, and this is what they were looking for to get this started. I mean, I can only imagine what Breece Hall could do running the ball behind an offensive line like this.
Yeah.
They have a real shot of being decent offensively, at least on the ground.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know what to expect from Justin Fields. I'm hoping that we get a good Justin Fields. I do think the kid has something in him, but we'll have to see for sure. Mason Taylor also is a solid pick. I like the kid out of LSU. I think he's a good tight end.
Some people were kind of shocked that he ended up going like in the second round to an extent. Like, we knew Warren was in theory the top tight end, but then the Bears drafted Colston Loveland.
Yeah.
I think there was a bit of I think the Mason Taylor pick, and I think the Georgia boy that you guys drafted in the 4th round, Smith. Those were two solid skill position player selections right there.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you're going to take it is classic Jets to take a receiver that's plagued by drops, but that's literally his first sentence on his draft report. But we'll see. I mean, maybe it was an injury thing. He did have a decent amount of injuries in college, so maybe he could get healthy and be somewhat of an impact player. I don't know how Justin Fields is going to feel about throwing to a dude in Georgia, from Georgia, when he's got all of his Ohio State buddies there. But look, it's an interesting start. It's not flashy like we were. It's not, a bunch of showmanship and bluster, and we probably won't get any results. We'll see. Maybe they're building teams the right way, and maybe it'll work out. Although, again, I still think it's the Jets and they're cursed, and I have never had so little faith in anything in my entire life.
Yeah, so there's that to say at least. But at least we got some speak on Membo, which was my goal from that one.
We'll move. In 2 months, I'll tell you they'll win the Super Bowl again. It's fine.
Absolutely. That's how it's meant to go, Justin. That's how it's meant to go. We talked about the NFC East. A couple NFC East teams were making moves. Justin, Kenneth Grant went to the Dolphins. Will Campbell went to the New England Patriots. Already the kid is endearing himself to the fan base, saying that he will do everything possible and would put his body on the line and sacrifice his life for Drake May. So that's the exact kind of offensive lineman that you want to bring into your organization. We mentioned the Saints and what they did for the offensive line. We mentioned some of the additions they made. 9th overall. It slipped to mind briefly, but Kelvin Banks Jr., They brought him into the organization as well, so he's going to be a key piece to that team going forward. Pick before them, Carolina Panthers, they took Ted McMillan out of the University of Arizona, big body guy there for Bryce Young to potentially throw to. So it was a decent amount of interesting selections in the draft. Walter Nolan was a slam dunk pick, by the way, for the Arizona Cardinals from our mock, as was Jelon Walker by the Falcons. So some defensive picks for the Bird teams there. They had some amazing draft stories. Rick and I discussed it post-draft, but the amazing Derek Carr story of him being drafted by the Steelers and his mom being there long enough for him to be able to tell her that he was drafted before she ended up unfortunately passing. So once again, from this podcast to Derek Carr, we hope you become a 10-time Pro Bowler because you are an absolute beast of a man, to say the very least. And it's just one of those heartwarming stories that you get around the time of the draft. Yeah, it's just so many things to look at. We kind of so I don't think we. Well, I know Rick and I did this. I don't know if you necessarily mentioned it when we talked about the Jaguars trading up, the Jaguars and the Falcons, because the Falcons traded up later in the first round. What do you make of the Jaguars and Falcons both trading first round picks for the 2026 draft to make their picks? Because the Jags traded their 2026 pick in the Hunter deal, and the Falcons traded their 2026 first round pick in the deal where they traded back up to get James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee. So, what do you make of those two teams with these? You hope calculated risks, to say the very least, for themselves.
Well, it made sense when you move from, what was it, 4-2 or 5-2. It makes a little bit less sense when you're moving up to 26. I mean, I like the trade for Jacksonville. I don't know what to think. I like James Pierce out of Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's essentially 2 first-round picks. They used 2 first-round picks on this kid, right? In theory.
Yeah, because it's the first round pick they traded up for and giving
Yeah.
up their first round pick next year.
Yeah. So like,
and they had to include a second round pick in the deal because it was the first and third for the Rams. That's probably why it took so much, because it was a first and third for a second and seventh, and then the first next year. So essentially, I don't know if the third and the second maybe come close to kind of canceling each other out, you could argue, but yeah, essentially like 2 first round picks to get the kid.
It's something. You gotta hope he's good. Like I said, I like the kid coming out. He is a really, really good player. He's got a high upside. It is definitely going to add to their defense, and it is going to help them because they needed some pass rush. They traded for Judon last year. I don't remember if they signed him long term, but the point is they needed someone there. They were among the worst rushing team quarterback pressuring teams in the league last year. So getting a good linebacker and a good edge rusher is important, but it's a high price to pay for someone you have not ever seen play before in an NFL uniform. And there's a reason that he wasn't up there with Abdul Carter. So, like I said, I think he could be good. You better hope that he's among the best pass rushers in the league because he gave up a lot to get him. The Falcons continue to kind of
intrigue us on draft day, right?
Yeah.
From picking a quarterback top 10 last year when they signed a guy, and now trading up for
like, it's for a team that we keep saying like, all right, this is the year they're going to get all their pieces together. They're going to be ready to go. I mean, don't get me wrong. This is an all-in move. Yeah. They obviously feel the same way, but like, why? I don't know. I don't know how to word it.
Probably. They're obviously trying to get us to.
I guess
to
pick them in the division is just why.
Yeah. Why?
Yeah.
Oh, I wish I could load it up here quickly enough, but I don't think I'd be able to. I'll send it to you separately. A funny picture, in regards to the word "why." To say the very least, it's a good one that I got in a friend group a couple of weeks ago. I will send this to Justin in the meanwhile, as we continue to break down but essentially end of the first. What did you make of the Eagles and Chiefs kind of making a enemy for enemy deal, Justin? The Eagles traded up one spot with the Kansas City Chiefs. The Eagles get Jahad Campbell. The Chiefs get Josh Simmons. Like, what do you make of that exchange between the two Super Bowl combatants and how they came out of that deal?
Yeah.
But both teams got what they wanted, essentially.
Yeah, there's no change to me. They got what they wanted. There's nothing crazy.
Fair. I would have thought Jahad Campbell would have been a perfect fit for the Buffalo Bills at 30. I would have thought Sean McDermott would have loved a guy like that, but instead they go with quarterback. To be fair, they did need corner, and they went with Maxwell Hairston, the guy who absolutely stole draft night, to say the very least, because he was congratulating every single guy that came up. And then he gets to go 30th overall. All 29 other guys should have came in to like absolutely mob him before he went into the stage. That would have been funny. That would have been good coordination. Media people should have thought of that. But no, in all seriousness, it's a nice story there. The Bills, they don't trade with the Kansas City Chiefs this time around. And they do that, right? Tyreek Williams to the Lions, Malachi Starks to the Ravens, and Josh Connerly Jr., offensive tackle out of Oregon. I believe, didn't you draft him in our mock, if I'm not mistaken? Was it him or Harmon, like you made the pick for in the early second round for us? I know it was one of those two.
I don't remember.
It was definitely one of them, to say the very least. I think it was Josh Connerly Jr., because it was the funny moment of the draft where you put in 10 cents into the sin bin for foul language there, to say the very least.
Yeah.
So, but that was a very good pick. So that I just quickly mentioned that because some very solid like late first round picks by some of the contending teams that we were going to have high expectations of here. I think Rick and I had a lot to say about like necessarily, and you don't need to rehash this, Justin, but like the Michael Williams selection by the 49ers. Some of the 49ers draft picks as a whole, Rick had questions about. Tyler Booker going to Dallas. Just Jerry Jones obviously wants to make his life easy, and just think of when he says Tyler, 3 of his 5 offensive linemen, it could be talking to any of them. So that makes life easy. Like, what did you, me not asking anything specific here, what did you make of some of the selections in the first round? Even if you want to think of some of the early second round picks, was there any team selection that stood out to you in either like a really good way or like a really, what are you thinking with this move here kind of way? Like, is there any picks that you want to highlight here in your thoughts from the draft?
Sure.
It doesn't need to just be one. You can list multiple now, but just like the floor is open to you for anything like you had from the draft.
that we haven't covered yet.
Yeah.
Loved Tet McMillan. I've been a big Tet guy for his entire time in Arizona. And they really have now no excuse for that kid to really start throwing the ball. Now that he's got his true number 1 receiver there.
Yep.
Good luck to Bryce Young. Let's hope he gets it. Another great wide receiver pick was Matthew Golden. Yes. Great move. If they finally make the first round pick, a couple years too late, but at least they're trying to do their current quarterback some good.
Dude, the crowd popped when they said that.
Well, they finally have a real number 1 receiver there too. So let's see if he can bring them to life. Who else did I like? I mean, we could always talk about Quinshawn Judkins. That was a great pick by the Browns, I thought. Yep. The Browns made some really interesting moves.
We'll talk about one of them in particular. Don't worry. We're going to want to get your thoughts on that.
Surprised by that one, but I like the Quinshawn Judkins move. I think that's the exact kind of style of football that they've always wanted to play. He is the logical replacement for Nick Chubb if they're not going to re-sign them, which obviously at this point they have said that's pretty much not going to happen.
Right. Henderson went 2 picks after Judkins, so the 2
Ohio State. I don't want to talk good about the Patriots.
Yeah.
It's not what I'm about here. Yeah, I think a lot of the draft was kind of pretty straightforward this year. There was a couple of surprising moves, but for the most part, like at least in the first couple rounds, things kind of went how you expected them to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And to say the very least, it's going to be interesting to see. I think this draft kind of screams. I think we have a chance to be really impressed by some of these guys that were picked in the second and third round. At least was kind of my deal with it. Like I think there's a couple guys here. I think we'll be the casual fan will be surprised. Like when they see it's like, oh, where's this guy drafted? Like I think people are going to be surprised by like what some of these second, third, maybe even a handful of the fourth round guys, and they could end up being really good contributors here within the first like year or two on their teams. Mm-hmm. Like I think even like again, I'm going to some good teams here, but you look at the later part of the second round, a team like the Chiefs getting Omar Norman Lott, right? Mukaba going to the Eagles at 64, Trey Amos going to the Commanders at 61. Just like smart picks being made by some of these teams. I forget which one of us. I think it was you that drafted him in the mock, Justin. But Ozzie Trapillo from BC went to the Chicago Bears in the second round as well. Like it just felt like a lot of good like selections here. It didn't feel like too many picks were made where you like maybe the player. Maybe you would have gone tight end or receiver or something like that. But like even with the Chargers, their first 2 picks, they went on offense. They go Hampton in the first round at running back, and they go Trey Harris in the second round with the wide receiver. Like I think especially with what happened at the end of the Chargers season, you could probably think to themselves like, okay, they'll be able to figure out the defense and the rushing attack. They just need a guy. Well, let's get a young, hungry, technically fresh body, even though he's been through a bunch of college with hits, but a new fresh wide receiver and running back for that team. It's new weapons, new shiny toys for Justin Herbert and to be able to use next season, to say the very least. it felt like there were a lot of just really good sound picks in this draft. And I know people are going to say like, oh, well, isn't that every draft? No, actually not. Like there's a good amount of drafts. I'm sure last year there were definitely questions. 2 years ago, there's definitely questions. Like just picks get questioned every single year, and time will tell if we're right or wrong. Like it's just how it works, to say the very least. So that's ultimately how it goes. But Rick and I talked about it. I want you to explain to the people what your reactions were, and then him finally being selected. The Shedeur Sanders fall and what happened in the draft, the coverage around it, if you have any notes about that, and then just like your thoughts about the situation as a whole for him. And Shedeur ended up being drafted, and Shiloh ended up going undrafted, if the people care. He goes undrafted, but he ended up signing with the Buccaneers as an undrafted free agent. So just for the record. But yeah, what was your reaction to the great Shedeur Sanders fall of the 2025 draft weekend?
I mean, I wasn't really shocked that he fell out of the first round, although I thought maybe at some point a team would trade up to get him.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't believe he was there on day 3 and didn't even go in the 4th round. He went in the 5th round. I mean,
right. I was going to say, I believe, if I'm not wrong, so it was the 2 quarterbacks in the first, Tyler Shock in the second, I believe 2 or 3 guys in the 3rd, none in the 4th, and then finally him going in the 5th round.
I mean, the only thing that I could sit here and say is maybe it was a personality thing. I mean, he's a cocky kid. I kind of like it, but like I understand that it rubs people the wrong way. It just didn't make any sense to me that a kid with that much talent and success fell that far, especially while his teammate and one of his best friends went 2nd overall. So I mean, again, there's a big difference in the personality there for sure. That's the only thing I could think of, but it didn't make any sense to me the way he felt. I mean, even if you were like unhappy with his personality, that much talent, I'm surprised no other team took a swing on him. I mean, good for the Browns. Now they have double the chance to, maybe find a real quarterback of the future, because we all know that it wasn't on the roster before this.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting move by them.
Because it's the funny thing, because they, like you mentioned, you double the chance, because they took Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round. I will say, because I think I said this when Rick and I spoke about it with reviewing the draft. I definitely said this during our mock draft. I think this is a great backup quarterback class. I think you have a lot of guys who are going to be in this league for a bit as like strong backup QBs. We need a replenishment of the backup quarterbacks in this league. Gone are the days of your Hennies and your Moores and guys like that. Like we need new, fresh backup quarterback blood to last for a long time.
Yeah.
And Dylan Gabriel was honestly a guy who I think he's a solid guy. He's not a strong arm quarterback. But he's just like, I think he's got the fundamentals down, the accuracy. I think he's a good, strong spot starter backup quarterback in this league for a while. At least that's what I'm going to hope. And
I thought Shedeur has what it takes to be a starter, though. So I don't necessarily understand why this fall happened. I mean, you understand certain guys going ahead of him, just for maybe style of play and fit to a team. But when you get to the 3rd round, and you are a team that clearly doesn't have a future plan at quarterback,
right?
Why are you not taking a stab at this kid? It didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, because it was Milroe at 92 and Gabriel at 94 to the Seahawks and the Browns respectively, and then at 144, 50 picks after the Gabriel selection, goes Shedeur. So this was the media reaction was interesting to me. And I feel like one of these days we're definitely going to have to like kind of talk about the draft from like the media perspective. I think what happened with Shedeur, at least from my point of view, and I've also tried to like consume as many like draft reaction videos as I could from like the actual good podcasters and YouTube personalities there are, and also a handful of like select shows, is that I think the thing with Shedeur is that he's a guy where I think there's a clear discrepancy between what we, and I'm not talking about the two of us, obviously. I'm talking about just the overall like fans think and see versus what the NFL talent evaluators see.
Absolutely.
And this has happened in drafts past, obviously. even especially with the quarterbacks. I think the number one thing that we've always brought up on the show before is the Kenny Pickett draft class, where you had, and I was working I'm still working in sports media, but working in sports media at the time, like somewhat around that hype of Ritter and Willis and Pickett and the kid from Ole Miss, what's his name, Corral. Like there was really trying to be a hype storm to get these kids to go in the first round.
There was.
And it only ended up being one. And I'm gonna be honest with you, if Kenny Pickett didn't go to Pittsburgh, I don't think he's getting picked by the Steelers, dude. Like I legitimately don't. So it's like there could have been, probably realistically, hindsight 2020 should have been a zero quarterback taken draft class in the last decade, and it would have been that one. And I think that it's a little tough because since then we've obviously had the quarterback classes where there's a really good quarterback, that Cam Ward being pretty good. I've defended Cam Ward a number of times on the show, it feels like. And I'm not even like a 100% Cam Ward guy, but I'm just like, I think we're being a little bit too harsh on the kid for his like last season, at least in terms of like some of the things. But I think with Shedeur, I think a lot of NFL talent evaluators clearly see something that people were trying to see, and Mel Kiper being the biggest one. I'm sure you saw Mel Kiper's reactions to Shedeur falling. Like, I'm trying to think of the right word. Right? What the heck am I saying? I'm trying to think of the right words to describe it, but it's almost to an extent kind of comedic, at least maybe a little bit funny to me, like how Kiper and Rich Eisen and guys like that were talking about Shedeur and why he was falling versus I don't think it's that far of a stretch to say that people in the NFL don't see all the things that we perceive, and if they end up being proven wrong, guess what? This is not the first time they'll be proven wrong on a quarterback. This will not be the last time they're proven wrong on the quarterback.
Definitely.
I think, and you'll agree, Justin, I think this is probably, maybe not probably, the biggest discrepancy from what the fans saw to what ended up happening. Because even, let's say hypothetically,
there's lots of reports that people said that this is more of a response to like the way he handled the draft process.
Right. Because then all the reports came out of, in particular, like the Giants were asked about his pre-draft interview, and Brian Daboll just like essentially no commented the thing.
Well, that's the right answer, though.
No, 100%. I agree with that
about any player.
Yeah, but like that essentially Shedeur was like sandbagging, basically. His interviews of like kind of like just not caring, essentially, is like kind of the way you could describe it.
He thought he was going to be handed stuff,
and also like they thought that they were going to go to the team that they wanted to go to, and I think everyone knows who I'm including when I say the word "they" on Shedeur's side. That the belief was going to be that Shedeur was going to essentially kind of pick where he wanted to go.
They were in control.
And I think it's clear to show the NFL is not playing this the way that it happens in the NBA, brother. It's not happening.
He also just wasn't that guy. Like, he was good. He wasn't I get to choose where I'm going good.
Yeah. No, agree. Like he
wasn't.
Justin, I think we could agree. He wasn't get his jersey retired by his college good. He actually wasn't really that good.
He helped change the program there.
Yeah,
they were bad.
You could wait 5 seasons to retire it, not 5 weeks.
Who knows if Dion is going to be there to retire his number later?
That's, I mean,
in five seasons.
Yeah, but again, it's one of those things where clearly a lot of the show ended up, and the sideshow, the circus, ended up probably playing in the hands. And I honestly don't fully blame teams if they thought, because you don't want a circus. You don't want the media attention to be on the backup quarterback. Like, and Rick and I were kind of discussing where, Justin, tell me not, like, you could probably think on one hand, like, how many teams could have drafted Shedeur at any point and it not be the number one story of whenever they were going to pick him? Like, in terms of comparing to the rest of the quarterbacks in the team. Like, and it wouldn't matter. Like, we were talking about Andy Reid and Mahomes. We were talking about Hurts and Sirianni. Like, essentially the teams like that, where he probably would not have played for several years because they would have been like, okay, yeah, we have him. That's it. Like, end of story. Whereas now in Cleveland, I mean, we know the intrigue of Deshaun Watson is probably going to miss the most of 2025. Joe Flacco's old. Kenny Pickett has small hands and fake kneeling down on a run and forever changed that rule in college football. just making stuff up as I go. And then they have Dylan Gabriel and Shador Sanders. Like, it will not surprise me if either of those two get playing time this season. It's probably just going to be a matter of who gets first. This is just it was interesting. I think you'd agree. The overall fall in reaction of Shador, and what came of that. So now that we've obviously been known, and we just wait to see when rookie camp happens, when training camp in full happens, the OTAs and all that. If you, Justin, yes, you specifically, if you somehow were to get in the ear of Shador Sanders and give him words of wisdom advice, the games master himself, the veteran you are in terms of going deep in pick challenges and fantasy football and postseasons in the games that we played growing up in EA and 2K and all that, all the experience you've gained over your years, from one Queens College alumnus to a Colorado Buffalo. I'm mainly just saying all this as jokes, but what would you say if you could just be a part of that inner circle and what they should be saying to him at this moment, now that he was finally drafted, and we're a couple weeks into it, obviously?
I don't think there's anything that I could say to Shador. Look, let's be honest about what this kid is. How many Division I scholarships was he given out of high school? He went to an HBCU.
Yep.
He worked his way up. He transferred to a Division I school. He helped put that school on the map right now. People are talking about Colorado football because Shador Sanders was there, and Travis Hunter was there, and Deion Sanders was the coach. They had some other help, and they had some other things, but they are there. We're talking about them because they went there and they made that program relevant. They made blockbuster games against USC and their number one overall pick, Caleb Williams. They had major successes there and put themselves into the ranked conversations, and they turned that program around. Whether you like it or not,
they did get a bowl game this past year for the first time.
Whether you like it or not, they put that program on the map. If you're going to tell me that Shador Sanders is starting for the Cleveland Browns in 3 years, I'm not surprised. I'm not. The kid's got what it takes. He's clearly a winner. He can put his nose to the grindstone, get to work, and prove that he is who he says he is. That's all he has to do. And that's all he's done so far as I could see in his life. You don't have to like him. You might think he's obnoxious. You might not want him to win. You might root against him every time. But the kid can win. The kid can play this game, and he can do it well, and he can do it at a high level. So he's got to sit down. He's got to sit back. He's got to say, what do I have to offer here? This is obviously going to be the best defenses he's ever played against. This is going to be the best offense he's ever played in. So let's see what's going on here. I mean, the Browns have a much better offensive line than the Buffaloes did last year, because last year's Buffalo's offensive line was rough.
Very true.
They're going to have a better run game because last year's run game was rough. He's going to have better receiver. Well, he might have better receivers. Travis Hunter's pretty good. But they have a real chance to let this kid shine here. Kevin Stefanski is a quarterback-driven coach. He has made an NFL career making quarterbacks look good. And obviously that has not worked lately in Cleveland, especially when Deshaun Watson has been on the field.
Yeah.
But this can be an ideal situation for Shador Sanders. I don't really think there's anything that I could tell him that would tell him otherwise. He knows what he's about. Prove it to everyone else.
Be about what you say you're about.
Prove that you are who you say you are.
There you go. There you go. Words of wisdom from the games master himself, to say at the very least. Last thing on that gut feeling. Do you think he'll start a game in 2025?
All things even and no freak circumstances? No, probably not. If he does, I think it's late in the year when they're still figuring things out and they're out of it. And, if that's the situation. I'm not saying that that's going to be the situation for them,
Right.
but that's the only way I see him starting a game outside of injury.
Probably fair. Yeah, well, one of the quarterbacks is already down, so 3 more to go, or 2, depending on if he
Even if he
outperforms
comes
Gabriel.
back, why are you putting in Deshaun Watson at this point? What do you have to prove with Deshaun Watson? He's not winning you a Super Bowl. Move on.
He's not winning you a playoff game. Maybe.
Move on.
like they've made the playoffs twice and
Going.
or no once.
Deshaun, look, Deshaun had his shot in Houston. Things changed.
Yeah,
a lot. Joe
the game
Flacco's
is
not
passing
winning
by.
you. Joe Flacco's probably not winning you a Super Bowl either. Kenny Pickett's going to be there for a couple years as a good backup. This is the Dylan Gabriel / Shedeur Sanders show. Let's see what the kids got. But that being said, I don't expect them to start week 1.
Well, definitely not week 1. I was just more men in general. But all right, it should be very interesting to see what happens in Cleveland and if Shedeur can prove everybody wrong and that he is that dude. And there's only going to be one way to find out, to say at the very least. Justin, any final thoughts, any final draft notes before we sign off here?
No, let's see what these kids got.
Yes, I love that. And we'll see what we have to talk about in the future weeks of this offseason, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us for a fun edition of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. Got to talk about the Derek Carr situation, look at it at all angles. We got the games master himself returning to the show and giving us his takes and thoughts on the draft. Now, Justin, Justin, we have really, I think, barring anything shocking, we have gone through all the big news things to happen. That means it's going to be a little bit of a ride until we get to the later portion of the summer when we do the division previews. But that just means we're going to find ways to have some fun, talk football, and have plenty of chaos along the way in the summer of 2025. The summer of chaos I think that's our third summer. Part 3 or 4. Yeah, we'll figure it out. Part 3.5. Thank you all so much for joining us on another edition of the show. And we will see you beautiful people next time. From us to all of you, enjoy today. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers that are actually watching the show. If any do, aside from ours. And we thank you. We love you all. Take care, everyone. And bye-bye.